and welcome to the Art of Being Human. We've been talking about some emotions here, and some of them can get pretty strong. So today I thought I'd do some work with aggression. What is it? How does it form? Why do we feel like we have to be aggressive? You know, I was watching the news, and although this program isn't predicated on the news by any means, but when you get a doctor that's dragged out of an airplane because the airplane is overbooked, even though he's paid for his ticket, and he explains he needs to stay because he has to meet his patients. He has patients to take care of, and they get mad, and they drag him out by force, and he's in the hospital recovering from injuries just by being dragged out of a plane. Something's wrong. Why can't we handle things in a much better way? And things are getting worse and worse. So I want to describe a little bit about aggression and go into the cause of it, and what, at least the cause of part of it. I may not be able to talk about everything that causes aggression, but aggression is very violent, it's very strong, it's very negative, and it occurs when people don't get paid attention to, or when they resist, and people get angry at them, and then the first thing they do is draw their gun and start shooting, or they start punching people out. It's just a very sad state of affairs. There is, if we want to look at it from a psychological point of view, such a thing as inward aggression and outward aggression, or we could call these internal aggression and external aggression. So what's the difference? If you are aggressing internally, internal or inward aggression, you are aggressing against yourself. That means when you are angry or upset about something, you don't express it so other people can hear it. You're not angry enough, or you don't show your anger in the terms of you're yelling or you're screaming or you're being very assertive, nothing like that. What you do is aggress against yourself. You kind of swallow it. You kind of keep it to yourself. You don't respond. But as a result, your body responds because it's actually aggressing against yourself. Every emotion has to be expressed in some way. You cannot have an emotion that's unexpressed. There are various ways of expressing it, but it will be expressed. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't do anything that shows people that you're upset about something, the body ends up by taking it. This is somehow involved with ulcers, although I also want to mention in terms of ulcers, a lot of ulcers are caused by a virus. It used to be thought that ulcers were, you were upset about something and it kind of internally ate away at your stomach, and that's the way you got an ulcer. And I think that's still partly true. But it's also true that a lot of ulcers are caused by a virus. And then, and you have to treat the virus that's causing the ulcer, and then the ulcer goes away. So at any rate, it's much more complicated than you're angry at something and so it's eating at you. But you can get anxiety, depression, different types of nervousness, panic. You can dissociate, you can split off from yourself. There's all kinds of things that you can do to express the emotion inwardly that for some reason you're afraid of expressing outwardly. I was watching a program of children who had been abused, college students who had been abused, and they were afraid to talk about it to anybody because whenever they talked about it, they were not believed. Oh, you're making it up. Oh, you're exaggerating. I had a friend of mine who's Catholic, and she was molested by a priest. Or he attempted to molest her. She talked to her mother about it, but of course the whole family was Catholic, and they reminded her that this is a man of God. He wouldn't do anything to hurt a child. And so finally she went to an aunt and expressed her concerns about what he was trying to do to her, and the aunt understood and said, "Don't worry, I'm going to take care of it. You won't be bothered again." And she never saw the priest again. He was just gone. So she had some kind of influence, and she did believe the child. So, if people are recognized, if people are acknowledged, if people are validated, I guess validation is the word I really want to use. If you validate somebody, you're saying to them, and maybe not in so many words, but they catch the drift, you're important, I'm listening to you. I believe you. I want to pay attention to you. I want to help you. And so therefore, that's important. What you've gone through is important to me. If you're saying that you've been abused, I want to do something to help you with that. And you're not just trivializing it. If you're trivializing it, you're just saying, oh, that doesn't count. Oh, it wasn't that bad. In other words, it wasn't that important, which can easily be translated into, you're not that important. So it happens, so what? You know, people get very upset because they're not acknowledged. And I think that's one of the things that leads to aggression. A lot of the children who have shot up their schools, they were loners. They didn't think anyone understood them. If they tried to reach out, they were rebuffed. People didn't accept them. The teachers thought they were odd. The students didn't accept them. And so if they had been accepted and talked to and said, yeah, this is tough, we need to work with this, I'll help you with it. And if the teachers were responsive and said, I really am concerned that you feel that way, let's talk about it, let's do something to help you, then that you're not going to get a big aggressive response, because they're going to realize that they're understood, and that even if you don't understand everything they're saying, you're trying to. And so that's very, very important, to acknowledge people, to try to understand where they're coming from. And when they say something, even if you disagree, you don't start an argument. I understand this is how you feel. Now, I may feel a little different, but what you're feeling is important to me. You are a human, and you have the right to feel the way that you do. So you acknowledge the validity of what they're going through. You acknowledge the validity of them. You validate them. You are important. I do want to help you. I think you're important, and I think you have something to offer. And that kind of will dissuade people from becoming aggressive, because if they feel understood and if they feel cared for, they're not going to just, go toward aggression, because they have somebody that's in their corner. And that's an important thing to remember. If your child comes to you and they're upset, you may not be upset because they dropped their bird drawing on the floor and it got ripped. To you, that's a very minor problem, but it's not a very minor problem to a 5-year-old who spent a lot of time trying to draw that bird. So you acknowledge them, you acknowledge their feelings, you work with them, you're interested in them, and you will find that people will be very, very helpful, and they can recover from some of the illnesses that they have, some of the strong emotions that they have. So at any rate, internal aggression is when you aggress against yourself, and it gives you physical symptoms: anxiety, depression, anger, deep emotions, crying, all of that kind of thing. The external kind of aggression is when you express it outwardly, so people understand it, people see it. I'm angry at so-and-so because of this. I'm angry at this situation because of that. And they have a chance to empathize with you. Now, there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. In sympathy, you feel sorry for them. In empathy, you're feeling with them. I feel angry just like you do. I feel upset just like you do. Maybe not to the extent, but I can understand why you're feeling as upset as you did. And so therefore, I understand why you made the choices that you did. That's understandable to me. And that goes a long way for a person not to extend their outward aggression to include crime, murder, warfare, gang warfare, shooting people up. A person gets fired and they don't think they were understood, so they grab a gun, they go back to their workplace, and they start shooting people. That is the ultimate in outward aggression. People need to express outwardly what they're feeling. They really need to do that. You don't want the body to have to take it, but at the same time, you don't want to become violent either. But you need to express outwardly. There are a lot of ways of doing that. Art does it, music does it, acting does it, sports does it. There's a lot of ways of acting out, acting your aggressions out without getting to the point where you're destructive. And when you find just the right hobby or just the right thing to do or just the right art to do, then you can see that that will help you to feel better. You get rid of it. It gets expressed. It's not like a pressure cooker that pops when it gets too much pressure in it. It just releases. If you know, I haven't seen a pressure cooker for a long time. If you're younger, you may not even know what they are. But it was cooking vegetables under pressure, and there would be a cap on a pan, and it would have a little round area, and it would bounce up and down. It wasn't really attached. It was attached in the way that it wouldn't fall off. But when the pressure got too high, it would just bounce upward and release the pressure gradually. You could see the steam coming out of that hole in that part of that was designed for it. And so when the pressure is released, then it stopped bouncing up and down. So we as people need to be able to express the things that we have on our mind and not get to the point where it gets to be violent or it gets to be so self-serving or it gets so that we do things to other people to undermine them, to hurt them in some way. You know, that saying, I get even. You know, I want to get even. If something happens to me, I don't get justice, I get even. And we don't want to have that happen. Getting even isn't the way. Expressing what you feel. This is what a democracy is about. You know, if some students are hanging around by a governor's office, they don't like something about their school, then he should talk with them. What is it? Let's work together. Can we resolve it? Instead of saying, oh, they're just a bunch of kids, they don't know what they're doing. You see, when we do that kind of thing, we are invalidating people, and you can't do that. I think that is part of the problem with aggression in society. So we do have the inward aggression and the outward aggression, and I want to mention something about depression here. It's kind of related, although not exactly, endogenous and exogenous depression, the two types of depression. In an exogenous depression, you are depressed because of something that's happening to you from the outside. You lost your job, you've got to move, your relative died. I mean, bad things happen. But it happened from the outside. It wasn't anything that was within your body. It happened in the outside. It's going to affect the way your body responds to it. But the origin of it is on the outside. And you can name dozens and dozens of things. You discovered that your son is on drugs, and you discovered that your car needs a lot more repair than you thought it needed, so you've got to dig up a lot more money to repair your car than you thought you were going to have to. It can be anything, but it's from the outside. Now, the endogenous depression is something that's going on within your system. You are depressed because your hormones are out of balance, your neurotransmitters are out of balance, there's something wrong in your system. Maybe your glands aren't operating right. If you're a female, you might be in menopause, but it's a physical thing within your body that's causing you to have the symptoms of depression. And if that's the case, you're going to be depressed no matter what happens on the outside world. You could just win a lottery of $1 million, you'll still be depressed because it's your body and the chemistry of your body that's making that happen. Nothing from the outside, but something from the inside. So when you talk about people either being depressed or something like that, you just have to think in terms of what's going on internally, what's going on externally, and how do you define this? Because something that a person is upset about, something that a person has difficulty with, has a cause. And of course, I've said it 100 times, but I'll say at least 100 more. There's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. If there is a symptom, there is a cause. You may not know what the cause is, however. If it's abuse or past abuse, you may have forgotten it. The brain is very good at forgetting those things that are troubling. You tend to forget the things that are the worst, not the things that are the simplest. And so therefore, having forgotten them, how does the body remind you that this needs attention? You'll start getting symptoms. You'll get the depression, you'll get the anxiety, you get the nervousness, and you don't necessarily know where it's coming from. You could get the panic and it hits you out of the blue, but you don't know why. It's just there. If you've forgotten what causes it, the body is trying to remind you of what it is because the body is demanding that you acknowledge it. If you acknowledge, and this is a little trick you might try with yourself, if you are getting panic or some kind of a disorder like that, one of the things you can do is acknowledge it. Yes, this is a bad day. Yes, I'm depressed today. Yes, I have some problems today, and acknowledge that. Now, you don't have to tell the world, but you have to acknowledge it to yourself. Once you've acknowledged the problem, a lot of times it decreases in its intensity, so it's not near as bad. I'm not saying the problem isn't there anymore, but it's lessened in its intensity so you can handle it. But if you say, I'm not going to allow myself to be nervous, I'm not going to be nervous. Me nervous? No, not me. I'm not going to let that happen. And you try to force yourself to feel something different than you're feeling, then you're only going to intensify the symptoms. If I was upset and angry, if I say, no, I'm not angry, I won't let myself be angry, then what happens? The anger increases. It increases because I'm not acknowledging what's going on within myself. If I acknowledge it and say, yes, I am angry and I'm upset, whether right or wrong, this is the way that I'm feeling, and I have to acknowledge the way that I'm feeling. It loses its grip on you, and it becomes much less intense, and then you can feel and work with it in a much better way. So I want to give you those tips. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of close it here, but what I'm going to do is to go into the cycle of aggression and what happens with aggression. I'm going to spend a few minutes on that on the next session, and then I'm going into the thought patterns that we have when we're not happy, when things are going wrong. What are the thought patterns that we have? A guy, his last name is Burns, put a lot of time in this, and I can see when I counsel people that it's really true. They go through certain patterns of thought, different kinds of thought, not everybody thinking the same thing. This is different than the defense mechanisms that I've talked to you earlier. It's a different kind of thing, but it all kind of relates together. So I'm going to close it here, and please join me next time.